going forward, where do we see Pakistan in the next 2 years? I think that is the more important aspect for a chartered accountant, from the chartered accountant point of view. This is based on my personal experience, handling the economy for 11 years. We are heading for a serious balance of payment crisis. Why? For 2-3 reasons. Economic sanction on Iran is going to be effective from July 1st, 2012. Economic sanction was imposed from January, 1st of January 2012, but there was a grace period of 6 months. So it will be effective from July 1st, which is also the beginning of our current fiscal year. And if Iran attempts to close the Strait of Hormuz, through which 17 million barrel per day oil supplies, which is about 1/5 of the world's supply, passes through that strait, in retaliation, oil prices may surge to $150 a barrel. And this is going to increase Pakistan's oil import bill as well as overall import bill. Export growth may remain very subdued, and naturally the trade deficit is going to widen. Current account deficit is also going to widen. So this is one reasons why I expect that the balance of payment will be in difficulties in the next 2 years. The second one is that there are heavy debt repayment is expected to the extent of $9 billion in 2012-13 and 13 and 14, the next 2 years, of which IMF debt will be $4.3 billion and $4.8 billion, where Pakistan will get $9 billion for debt servicing and also for financing of large current account deficit. So Pakistan will face large financing gap and will not be able to service its external debt obligation. And Pakistan will have no option but to go to the IMF in a very desperate condition. Fiscal situation is also likely to deteriorate further because of the election year budget. And the writing is already on the wall, because there will be no tax measures and no tax reforms, doling out of resources to win election. Budget deficit will be somewhere between 7 and 7.5% of GDP. And public debt is also expected to rise. And financing of this large budget deficit will be primarily from domestic sources and from the commercial bank, as it is going on currently. This will lead to crowding out, higher interest rate, and decline in investment and further slowing of economic growth. Weakening of physical infrastructure and human capital owing to less resources allocated to these sectors in the budget. Power crisis is likely to persist. Hike in power tariff to continue, but this is not a solution to address our energy problem. So let me summarize. In the next 2 years, I see low investment, low economic growth, vanishing of foreign private investment, rise in unemployment and poverty. Now, what can be done? How should we address these challenges? It is quite natural that no single party will win the election or will form the next government. It will be a coalition government, and having a coalition government in an immature democracy is very difficult for economy. Coalition democracy, a coalition government, is a normal phase in many democracies in the world, but they have become mature. They think for the national economy or think for their country, not for personal agendas. Unfortunately, coalition government has not been strengthened in Pakistan, and that we will be facing the difficulties. So we need a strong economic team and commitment of the government on reviving economy. Without government commitment, no economic team can turn around this economy. Financial discipline would be the litmus test for the new coalition government. Every government will say, yes, economy is on our agenda. But the litmus test is, are you practicing discipline, fiscal discipline or not? If there is no discipline, there is no commitment. I think in that way. My advice would be that go to the IMF for a new program. As an economist, I should not have said this. But the fact is that we have an option. It is a matter of time. Should we go to the IMF when we are very vulnerable, or we go to the IMF when we are less vulnerable? Everybody would say, you go to the IMF when you are less vulnerable. And bring fiscal deficit to 3% of GDP in the next 3 years. That is why at the very outset, I said, in 3 years' time, this economy can be turned around. We have to implement tax system and tax administration reform, widening of tax bases, and addressing the public sector enterprises issues, circular debt issues, power crisis, and these can be done. NFC award has become a source of macroeconomic instability in this country. Macroeconomic instability. With the presence of this NFC award, there can never be a meaningful fiscal policy in this country. There is some inherent bias, and I would urge the government that they should not be very touchy about this. A mistake has been committed because it was done in a very haste. In 4 or 5 months, the award was given. And in such a haste it was given, we have committed a mistake. So there is no harm in accepting the mistake and correcting the mistake in the larger interest of the country's economy. We must improve our relations with international financial institutions. Currently, it is at the lowest ebb. Take private sector into confidence. And government's economic team must meet private sector on a regular basis to build their confidence. Consistency and continuity and transparency in policies should be the main pillar of the government's economic team. Accelerate the pace of privatization in a transparent manner. Here the government will have to define its role, whether government wants to be in the business of doing business, or the government's job will be to create an environment for the private sector where the private sector come forward and take the economy forward. So this is the decision the government will have to take at a very strategic level. I personally feel that this is not the job of the government to be in the business of doing business. Civil servants are not trained to run factories or steel mills or railways. These are the commercial proposition, and let the private sector handle the situation.